I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, and this is Capitol Download. We're in the Senate with Texas Senator John Cornyn. Thanks so much for being with us.
Great to be with you.
Your home state of Texas has seen this big influx of kids from Central America. You and Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar put forward a bipartisan proposal to deal with it. Do you think Congress will act on this problem before you leave for the August recess?
Well, we certainly should. And I think the consequences of failing to act are going to be relatively serious. In other words, the numbers that we're seeing are growing year by year, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But as you may have noticed, Congress has been polarized and not a lot's been done.
Do you think Senator Reid, the majority leader in the Senate, will allow your plan to come up for a vote?
Well, I expect that the House will probably act first this week, and what we have proposed will likely be included in that. And it's really then up to Senator Reid whether he will allow that bill, which includes both money and policy, to go forward in the Senate. The track record hadn't been very good, but like I said, at some point there's going to be a price to be paid for this increased number of children coming across unaccompanied and other people who are simply exploiting this loophole in our immigration laws.
Is it your understanding that President Obama would be willing to sign legislation that does what you would do in your bill?
The president can listen to the political advisors who tell him you can't go there, Mr. President, and do nothing. And I don't believe a clean or unamended without policy changes, supplemental appropriation will pass the House or the Senate. And so I think if he wants to do something, which I'm in favor of doing, then this is the package that we need to act on.
So some congressional Democrats, including some very high-ranking ones, express opposition to changing the rules for these kids that come from Central America. You're saying that's the deal they'll have to make if they want to get the additional money the president has called for? They'll have to agree to something like this, some change in the rules.
If it was good enough for Mexican children in 2008, it ought to be good enough for Central American children in 2014.
Here's what some people have said, including Maryland's Governor Martin O'Malley, that these kids will be returned to a situation that is where there's not only poverty but a lot of violence. He said we'll be returning children in some cases to their certain death. Does that bother you? He said it's our tradition that we would accept these children as refugees fleeing very difficult circumstances.
In the short term, America, as much as some people would like to, simply can't accept anybody and everybody on their terms who wants to come to the United States, because that would obviously overwhelm our capacity to assimilate those folks as well as deal with them in a humane and responsible way.
You are the number 2 ranking Republican leader in the Senate, and you've watched politics in this town for a long time. Is it your sense that the ingredients, the atmosphere is there for a deal to be made before the August recess? I mean, from the outside, it doesn't really look like it.
Well, I think it may be one of those things where people say, no, we can't do this, but then quietly recognize that something needs to be done. And my hope is that that's what is at work here. There's going to be consequences to that as well. For example, you're going to see places not only like Massachusetts, California, Oklahoma, Washington, Virginia, Maryland, and other places where the local population is going to rise up and say, not in my backyard. And I think that's going to do nothing but escalate unless we deal with this now. So
let's talk about the short-term consequences and the long-term ones. Say Congress goes out and has not either provided money or changed the 2008 law. What do you think the administration is going to do in the short term?
Well, I think their options are limited. They really are in a box in a way, because this isn't a situation where the president with his pen and his phone can unilaterally do things. He can't appropriate money. So this is really the leverage point that is important to actually solving the problem, giving the president and the executive branch some of the resources they've requested on an emergency basis to deal with this crisis. Why we can't do that is beyond me.
And over the long term, what are the political consequences for Republicans if this immediate problem with immigration isn't dealt with and no bigger fix for immigration is passed? What do you think the consequences are for Republicans looking down the road, say in the 2016 presidential race?
Well, it doesn't bode well for our ability to do any immigration reform. If we can't do this now on an emergency basis, it's going to be harder for us to do it next year, when I hope we have the majority in the House and the Senate.
Texas Governor Rick Perry is announcing he will send the Texas National Guard to the Rio Grande Valley. Is that a good idea? Does that deal with this problem?
Well, we do need more federal resources on the ground, and Governor Perry has taken the leadership role in trying to raise attention to this problem and to try to help address it. It's not a long-term solution, but it does provide on a temporary basis some additional manpower.
But it doesn't really do anything about the kids, right? Because the kids are eager to turn themselves in.
This is an interim step, and unfortunately we've had to take it because the president has simply rejected doing what needs to be done in order to address the problem.
How do you assess President Obama's leadership on this issue?
Well, I'm sorry to say it's been pretty abysmal. Not coming to the border strikes me as just fundamentally arrogant and irresponsible.
Your fellow Texas Senator Ted Cruz has called for rescinding President Obama's 2012 executive order that provided temporary legal status to some young people who were brought here illegally as children. Is that a good idea?
I agree that that was not within the president's authority at the time. What I'm looking for is a way to try to thread this needle during this short 2-week period now until the August recess.
Governor Perry was in Iowa last week. It looks like he's running once again for the Republican presidential nomination. Do you think he's improved as a presidential candidate?
I'm thinking that this is, there are second chances in life, including political life, and my sense is he's making a good impression by and large. I know he ran shortly after he had back surgery, and it's not a good time to jump into a presidential race. So he's got another chance to make an impression, and I expect him to pursue that.
A second chance to make a first impression, maybe.
Yeah.
And thinking about the midterm elections in November, do you think Republicans will win control of the Senate?
I do. I think, we're suffering a little bit of Obama fatigue here into the midterm and the second term of the presidency. And I think the president really has hung some of his supporters out on a limb. They passed policies like Obamacare, among others, that are proving to be very unpopular because they're not proving to be to doing what they were advertised to do. And then just the president's unwillingness to really engage and to roll up his sleeves and try to get things done. This is not a job where you give a speech and expect people to just fall neatly in line and do what you ask them to do. You actually have to work at it. You have to do some deals. You have to compromise, and that's the nature of the legislative process. The president seems to want none of it.
One of the most endangered Republicans is Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate. Now, if he happened to lose, would you like to be the Republican leader?
Well, I don't expect Mitch to lose. I can't imagine Kentucky sending another Harry Reid supporter and vote for President Obama to Washington, particularly because of the war on coal. So I have every confidence that Mitch will win that race and that he'll be the next majority leader in the United States Senate.
Senator Cornyn, thanks for joining us on Capitol Download.
Thanks, Susan.